you. Yeah. That's amazing. Right, get you to do our cubs. You're like a real life Bear Grylls. You've got all that. Keep fit anyway.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of Winchester City Council's Planning Committee, taking place in the Walton Suite of Winchester Guildhall. It is Thursday, the 11th of December 2025, and the time is 9:30 a.m. My name is Councillor Jane Rutter, and I'm Chair of the Planning Committee. To my right is our Vice Chair, Councillor Jonathan Williams. Around the table, we have the other elected members of the committee, and we are supported today by a number of officers. Simon Avery, our Principal Planning Officer North, Daniel Lucas, our Legal Advisor, the case officers, which will change usually with each item, and Claire Buchanan from Democratic Services, who supports the committee and operates the recording equipment. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded to the Council's YouTube channel. Subtitles are available and advice on how to turn those on is set out on the website. May I remind you all to ensure your mobile phones and any other electronic devices are on silent or preferably turned off entirely. In the unlikely event that it is necessary to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound. Please follow all the instructions given to you by our team. Please make sure you look at the handout provided on your chairs or on the information slides displayed on the way in or during the breaks for further guidance about this meeting. To ensure the smooth running of the meeting, I ask that nobody calls out from the back of the room during the proceedings. In accordance with our public speaking protocols, those who have registered to speak will be able to address the meeting for their allotted time. If there is any disruption of the proceedings and the work of the committee is not respected, it may be necessary to temporarily adjourn the meeting. Finally, can I welcome members of the public to the meeting? Those of you who have registered to speak, I will call you forward when it is your turn to make your contribution. Members of the committee may ask you questions of clarification, so please remain at the microphone until after members' questions. The microphone is turned on by pressing the button on the base of the unit, and a timer will appear on the screen to remind you of your remaining time. The other thing I'd like to do is remind members and anyone else listening that the date of the next meeting of the Planning Committee has been moved to Tuesday, the 20th of January, 2026. Turning now to our agenda. So, Claire, do we have any apologies and deputy members, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, apologies for absence received from Councillor Aaron with Councillor Pett deputising. Thank you.
Thank you. Any disclosures of interest, members? Councillor White.
I'd like to declare that I am ward councillor for agenda item 9, but I haven't discussed this application with anybody.
Councillor Small.
Similarly, I am ward member for item number 8 in Whiteley, but I haven't discussed it with anybody.
Thank you. Councillor Pett.
I just have to declare a disposable pecuniary interest as a member of the South Downs National Park Authority, but I do have a dispensation to speak on all items.
And decide. Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I need to declare that I have a disclosable pecuniary interest in respect of all items on the agenda due to my additional role as a Hampshire County Councillor. However, as there is no material conflict of interest regarding these items, I have a dispensation granted by the Audit and Governance Committee that enables me to speak and vote on these matters. Additionally, I have to declare an interest on item 7 as I am the ward member. However, I have had no discussions regarding this application.
Thank you very much. Minutes of the previous meeting. Members, you've seen the minutes of the previous meeting. Can I have your agreement they are an accurate record, please? Is that agreed?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And finally, we need to accept the update sheet as an addendum to the report. Is that agreed, members? Agreed. Thank you very much. Good. So now we turn to the matters on our agenda. Agenda item number 6 is at the White House, Sleepers Hill in Winchester. Where are we? Our presenting officer is Megan Osborne. So Megan, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me all right? I'd like to draw your attention first to the update sheet. A few updates on this regarding this application. So there was a typo error. This application is now for 5 dwellings and not 6. I referred to the permitted development that's been removed and list what those permitted development rights are for. So they're listed in there. There's been a change to the nutrient calculations and therefore that's been updated and there's a change in there. There's a change in wording to condition 17 regarding the EV charging points, so each dwelling will require one. And there was an additional condition 23 regarding a management plan for the site to be put on it. There's also a verbal update regarding my report. I believe there's an error in it regarding the trees on the eastern side of the site, and I refer to it to be a TPA.
Megan,
Can I just check your microphone on your laptops are muted because I get feedback through the microphone
How
system.
do I do that?
Check microphones on laptops are muted, please.
slight technical error. Hold on.
Okay. Right, regarding the TPO on the eastern side of the site, it's not TPO blanket all the way down the eastern part. It's just a section of it, and I'll show you a plan of that within my presentation. So onto my presentation. The application site is on Sleepers Hill, it's on the northern side of Sleepers Hill. There's an existing dwelling on the site called the White House. A driveway leads up to this property. There are surrounding properties. To the north there is Orchard House. To the south there is Highcroft, in between Sleepers Hill and White House. To the eastern side is an access drive to the dwellings to the rear, and then the Holt beyond that. And to the west is the Royal Crescent. This is a mix of houses and apartment blocks. The access is onto Romsey Road. This is an aerial photo of the site. So the site is here. You can see the driveway going up and then the existing dwelling house here. You can see the number of trees around the site. This is the TPO map that I was referring to. So the green areas are TPO trees. So the eastern side of the site, there are trees here, but they're not TPO. There is a small section of TPO trees to the right hand side here on the eastern side of the site. And the western side of the site, these are all TPO'd in between the property and Royal Crescent on that side. The proposal is for the demolition of the existing house on the site and replacement of 5 dwellings. This has been amended from the originally submitted application. There's been an amendment to reduce it from 6 dwellings to 5 dwellings. There's been a reduction in the overall floor area of the scheme from the originally approved, submitted application, sorry. There's generally more space surrounding the dwellings, more landscaping. Plots 1 and 2, which are the two plots to the right, are 1.5 stories. These are the 2 beds. They've been shifted slightly about a metre away from the trees to the east. This is the block plan showing the site again. So you have the driveway going up Sleepers Hill, from Sleepers Hill to the site. On the right hand side, you've got the smaller dwellings. These are both 2 bed dwellings, 1.5 story, rooms in the roof, detached garages. And then on the western side of the site, you've got 2 4 beds either side, and in the middle you've got a 3 bed. You've got a detached garage to the front of plot 4, and then garages to the side of plots 3 and 4. Just take you through some of the street scenes. So you've this is looking from the driveway effectively towards the 3 larger dwellings on the side. So you either side of 2 brick dwellings are the 4-bedroom properties, and the middle of the white one is the 3-bed property. This to the side is Highcroft, and to the north of the site is Orchard House. This to the bottom right hand side of the screen is another street scene showing the 2 smaller dwellings on the driveway leading up to the site, showing plot 1 and 2. These are identical. Take you through. Right, so this is plot 1 and 2, they're the same. So it's just showing the elevations. And then the floor plans. So these 2 bedrooms. The central atrium to the front is a landing area, has got a small window to the front. Other than that, it's roof lights and then windows to the side. And this is plot 3. This is the 4-bedroom dwelling, brick built. And plot 4 to the middle, this is the 3-bedroom. And then plot 5, which is the 4-bedroom at the top of the site, which has got the detached garage. This is the landscaping plan. I don't know if you can see it, it's very small. On it shows some cycle parking to the rear of the 2 smaller houses. The houses, plots 3, 4 and 5 have got garages which are ample size for storage and cycle parking. There is a bin store proposed at the front of the site onto Sleepers Hill. Just take you through some photos. So the bottom left hand side of the screen, that's view up the driveway, the existing driveway. So you can see the side boundary and the trees beyond. And this is a slightly different angle of that same view. More photos. So this on the left hand side is photo taken down the driveway looking towards Sleepers Hill. And the one on the right hand side is a view of the existing house. This is White House. This photo is taken from the site. You can see the arrow looking out towards Royal Crescent towards the rear. These trees are TPO'd along here, and there's a dense boundary along the side here with Highcroft, and then to the right is White House. And then again, that view slightly different. You can see the boundary a bit more on this photo. Again, left hand side looking down the driveway towards those trees alongside. There's a small section of them that are TPO'd, but these generally aren't TPO'd. And this is a view looking so you can see Orchard House to the north of the site there. These are photos that are taken in the summer. That to ones of the rear garden of the White House, looking at the trees beyond that go into the Royal Crescent. And this is again Royal Crescent, so these are trees that are TPO'd here, and then you can just see the Royal Crescent here, which is a mix of flats and houses. This is the driveway again. It just shows it in the summer, so it's a bit more vegetation showing in the trees to the eastern boundary along there, and then again of the White House. So this is showing an impression of the view from Sleepers Hill. So the top one is the existing of what you see currently. Bottom one is after a year. So they proposed landscaping along the boundary with this house, soft landscaping, and insisted on that rather than fencing. And then you can see the top of the bin store just to the bottom here. And then I'll take you through. So the top one is 5 years on, so that it's grown up a bit. You can still see the house, and then the bottom one is 15 years on. You will see the house, however, I don't feel it's detrimental to the character of the area. Therefore, the proposal is for 5 dwellings on the site is acceptable in principle. The layout and design is considered acceptable in relation to the character of the surrounding area and would not result in any unacceptable impact towards neighbouring amenities. The applicant has worked with officers and submitted amended plans addressing our concerns. It is therefore considered that the resulting scheme can be supported subject to the conditions as set out in my report and the update sheet. Thank you, Chair.
Good, thank you very much, Megan. So we now turn to public speaking. And our first speakers are Ian Galvin and Ian Fleming, who are objectors. Gentlemen, you will have 3 minutes between you. Have you arranged how you're going to share the 3 minutes? You have, good. All right, well, when you're ready, the timer will start when you start speaking. So, do we have a presentation? Sorry about this slight delay.
We've been transferred to a new system and it's all updated. So you have to bear
Computer
with-
says no.
yeah.
We will get there. I'm sorry about the slight delay. Okay, when you're ready, thank you.
Yeah.
Chair and members of the committee, thank you for hearing our concerns. We represent a number of local residents and would like to be clear from the outset, we are not opposed to development or progress. We do oppose developments that are excessively dense, overbearing, environmentally damaging, and wholly out of keeping with the character of the area. Our detailed submission provided you with a more visual case for the objections to illustrate clearly why this proposal conflicts with local design guidance and council policies, as noted on the slide in front of you. Key concerns we have: the proposed density is far beyond what is typical for the area. It is over 3 times the density of its neighbours. This is not just about approving 5 new houses. It is that we would set a precedent that will lead to excessive infilling, permanently eroding the character of the area, contrary to the local design guidelines. The massing and height are severely overbearing. Plot 5 stands over 70% taller than the neighbour and is positioned very close to the boundary. It is grossly disproportionate. Contrary to the setback claims, the development will be prominent from multiple viewpoints. Plot 3 will loom above Highcroft Cottage and will be clearly visible from the road. The whole development will be seen through the tree line in the winter and spring. Plot 1 remains an unworkable design. It is squeezed into what is effectively a driveway. Plots 1 and 2 sit directly against mature trees that define the site, and council service leads have raised multiple issues that are not resolvable. The urban massing and bulk of these dwellings are wholly out of character with the neighbouring Sleepers Hill properties. The proposal acknowledges the loss of local biodiversity with a deficit to be made up elsewhere. But the creeping effect of this will be to permanently remove the very character of the city of Winchester to the detriment of its citizens. Approving this scheme renders local design guidance as almost worthless and will accelerate the erosion of the character that makes Sleepers Hill distinctive. For all these reasons, I strongly urge the committee to reject this proposal.
So, in summary, residents are not opposed to development per se, but this proposal is too dense, too overbearing, and is out of keeping with its surroundings. If there's any doubt in the committee's mind, we highly recommend a site visit by the members so that they can directly observe the issues we have raised. Approving this proposal sets a very damaging precedent. You would be signalling that key design principles, spaciousness, landscape sensitivity, and low density are optional. If de facto 18 dwellings per hectare acceptable, why not more? Once that boundary is crossed, it cannot be defended in future applications, and the wooded open character of Sleepers Hill, valued by the City of Winchester now and in the future, would be permanently removed. We ask you to uphold local policy principles, protect this unique area, and ensure future developments truly contribute positively. For these reasons, members of the committee, I respectfully urge you to reject the application, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you for sticking within the time. Members, do we have questions of clarification for our objectors? No questions? You were very clear. You made your case very well. Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen. If you could just switch off the mic as you go. Thank you. We now turn to the ward councillors, Councillor Thompson and Councillor Westwood. And you have 5 minutes each. I'm sure you won't need that long though, will you? Oh dear. So when you're ready, 5 minutes each. Thank you.
So firstly, thank you for allowing me to speak at the meeting today. To be clear, I'm also supportive of new housing on this site. I do, however, have 3 real concerns on the proposals before you today. The first concern is due to the scale and density of the development, which in my opinion impacts negatively on the adjacent properties because of how close the proposed development is to existing properties. Is overbearing, with the proposed development being significantly higher than the existing adjacent properties. The development will deliver a new close on Sleepers Hill, not a new house. There is no provision for refuse vehicle access, and all bins, up to 15 of them on a typical collection day, will need to be located on the narrow Sleepers Hill Road for collection. It further degrades the biodiversity on the site, which has already been depleted by the felling of many mature trees in early 2025 prior to the submission of this planning proposal, and the further loss of biodiversity due to the density of housing and associated hard landscaping across the site. In summary, this proposal fails to comply with Winchester District Local Plan Policies DM15, DM16 and CP20 regarding design, scale and density in relation to local character. My second concern is looking at how the proposed development sits within the Sleepers Hill area. The leafy wooded character of Sleepers Hill was identified as being the most important characteristic during the public consultation on the Sleepers Hill local area design statement. My view is that local design statements are important documents and should be considered in any planning application. This development does not sit well with the local design statement. The development will set a precedent for development within the Sleepers Hill area, with the proposed development being significantly denser than any previous development in the area. You only have to look at the numerous high-density infill developments that have happened on Chilbolton Avenue to see the path this development is taking us down, should the committee be minded to support the officer's recommendation. Is that what we want to happen? My third concern is on the revision to the initial proposal, which attracted sufficient negative comment to lead the developer to change the design. Or have they? The revised proposal reduces the number of properties from 6 to 5, but it increases the height of buildings. So it reduces the internal area of the development by only 4%. A quote from the Winchester City Council landscape officer, who concluded in his initial response with a scheme that is only 4% larger than the one in front of you today. They said, given the above, the design suggests overdevelopment conflicting with the surrounds and lack of sympathy with the character of Sleepers Hill. It would benefit from a redesigned scheme that better suits the context and the site's shape. The plans on paper and the wide-angled photos in the report shown today and in the report do not fully convey the impact of this development in this area. To understand the full impact of this development and the potential long-term damage to the area, I urge members of this committee, if you are minded to support the officer decision, to request a site visit before arriving at your decision. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, and thank
We'll
you.
we'll take members' questions when you've both finished. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. And thank you, members of the Planning Committee, for allowing me to speak on this development. Like my ward colleague has said, I'm speaking in support of the nearby residents living on Sleepers Hill in their objection to the planning application. I also don't have a problem with building on this site per se, but I just feel that the 5 houses proposed are just too much for this particular site. So I agree with residents' views that it is an overdevelopment, and although I'm pleased to see that the scheme has been altered from 6 houses to 5, with a slight repositioning of the plots, it does not address the issue of the very close proximity of the buildings to the existing trees, and in losing the 6th house has just meant that the bulk of the remaining 5 houses have increased in size and height. And frankly, plot 1 on the driveway just looks as if it's been squeezed in uncomfortably. And this driveway is not a wide driveway, it is actually quite narrow. As we've heard, the Sleepers Hill area is characterised by an abundance of very large trees and shrubbery, and indeed this particular plot in which the White House sits is a very fine example of this. It's an individual house, it's incredibly low density, and houses standing in other large plots are surrounded by mature trees and shrubs. And all this is set out in that important document, Sleepers Hill Local Area Design Statement, which I agree with my colleague is a really important document when taking planning applications into consideration. And I would also like to quote the consultation response from our own landscape team, which says, "There is little room for trees of a substantial size in the space available to screen views from the road." And it goes on to say that whilst there are incremental improvements, plots 1 and 2 raise issues regarding TPO trees, very difficult garden configurations, and an adverse effect on views from Sleepers Hill, with limited scope for meaningful mitigation through planting. My colleague also talked about Chilbolton Avenue and what has happened there, and certainly in years gone by, I have been addressing this committee on numerous plots that were developed on Chilbolton Avenue, and I do feel that Sleepers Hill is becoming the next Chilbolton Avenue in a way, in that large houses on large plots are being snapped up, and developers are cramming in as many homes as they can. So I do believe that for the committee to fully understand where this plot sits and its context within Sleepers Hill, it would be really important to have a site visit before you actually made your decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much, councillors. Members, do we have questions or clarification for the local councillors? No? Okay, thank you very much indeed for your time. Thank you. And finally, we turn to the supporter, Mr. Garnett. Stuart, good morning. As you know, you have up to 3 minutes. When you're ready, you know the routine. Thank you.
Good morning. Sleepers Hill has experienced change over time. This is acknowledged in the Sleepers Hill local area design statement, which said development has accelerated in the last 30 or 40 years. But it's worth bearing in mind that's published 18 years ago now. So the period of change is now far longer, and recent precedents close to the site include immediately next door at the Royal Crescent, 88 homes in the last 20 years. Diagonally opposite, a single house replaced by 6. The Holt next door developed for 4. Further along at Little Snakemore, a recent Shorewood development, 4 houses. And as you go along the road, there are other infill developments, King's Crescent, Sleepers Hill House, the Day House. There's no rigid density level along Sleepers Hill. It varies, as high as 30 dwellings per hectare at King's Crescent and 54 at the Royal Crescent next door. At only 15, this must be recognised as a lower density, not out of step with the character of the area, in a location where the principle for development clearly exists, giving its setting well located to the city centre. In any event, development is more than a simple mathematical exercise of density. What's the actual change you would see? Many of the surrounding houses are clearly very prominent in the street scene, such as Sleepers Hill Garden opposite, the imposing entrance wall and houses of the Holt next door, the same true at Little Snakemore, and development opposite, and so on. By contrast, this site is very, very different. Save for the initial views of the chalet bungalow at plot 1, which will recede as the new hedgerows and trees mature, the rest of the development will have very limited visibility, set well back into the plot behind Highcroft Cottage, yet more new hedgerow and tree planting in an already well-established, mature landscape environment. The proposals have been subject to positive change because of consultee comments and your officer's advice, reducing the number of houses and by consequent density, the amount of floor space, amended designs, increased spacing around housing and between boundaries, and increased planting with 34 new trees, for example. Finally, our proposals were based on advice from former council tree officer Kevin Cloud, who concluded this development will not harmfully impact trees or their contribution to amenity and character either during or after construction. No buildings are within the root protection area for retained off-site trees, and indeed the chalet bungalows have been repositioned further away. We recognise the importance of surrounding trees. It's a defining characteristic of Sleepers Hill. It's something we have positive experience of from our recent development 2 doors down. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garnett. Members, do we have questions or clarification for our supporter? Councillor Laming.
Yes, Sleepers Hill is a private road, so all the residents contribute to the maintenance. Are you proposing then, have you come to an agreement with the local residents on the increased number of properties using the road?
I don't have the details on that. It's something that we would have experienced at Little Snakemore, and clearly it worked okay. From that perspective, there were no issues, so we don't expect anything with this situation here.
I think it might be covered by the new condition 23, which is talking about management of shared spaces, and that inevitably will include Sleepers Hill itself. Yes, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask, in regards to sort of the rendered images that we've got here. So there is a condition 4 in regards to the landscaping plan. One of your rendered images is 15 years after the development built, but obviously the landscaping plan only maintains those trees that are planted, especially to sort of screen plot 1. Would you sort of be willing to sort of accept potentially an amendment to that condition to 15 years to match the rendered image?
I suppose that's a matter of advice for your officers. I think that it's normally in relation to the enforceability for the period of a condition. I think that there's a relationship in terms of the landscape condition, whether it needs to say some kind of wording. Mr. Lucas might have better answer for that in terms of the enforceability for it.
I'm just wondering whether you would be willing, as obviously as the applicant, to sort of accept something
I have no
regarding screening on.
I have no issue
Okay.
in terms of any of those suggestions.
Thank you.
Councillor Langford-Smith.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned in your statement that there will be 34 new trees. Are you able to tell us how many trees were removed prior to the application coming forward, please?
Off the top of my head, I don't know. I was not involved with that. I did have a check through the previous information. I think there was let's say it's in round figures about 10 to 12 trees, maybe slightly more or less than that. In terms of those trees, none of those were TPO'd. I understand that they had all been surveyed before any felling had taken place.
Thank you. Any further? Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. Can you tell me perhaps the detail of the distance between the rear of plots 1 and 2 and to the tree line root systems?
Are you talking about to the eastern boundary? Yes. So I believe that the distance is probably in the region of about 2 to 3 metres from the back of the house to the boundary. Then the trees are then beyond that on that strip of land where the access road is.
And the root system of the trees themselves?
So all the buildings are outside of the root protection area. We did submit a plan which showed the tree protection plan, which shows root protection areas, so it confirms that the buildings are outside. That tree protection plan that was submitted was at the time that we had 6 houses on there. When we've changed it to 5, what we've done is those 2 bungalows, we've moved them further away from the boundary by about another metre. So it just validates again that beyond the root protection area for those trees.
Okay, thank you.
I believe trees are protected by condition as well, so. Any more questions, members, for our supporter? No, thank you very much, Mr. Garnett. You may return to your seat. Thank you. Good. So, any additional comments from you, Megan, before we turn to questions?
No, thank you.
No? Okay. So, members, questions on the whole report. Councillor White.
I just wanted to know particularly about the ridge heights of plot 3 and plot 5, and also it mentions in the report about level changes across the site. I mean, obviously I visited the site, but from the road it was very difficult to tell what the topography of that particular site is. So how the level change might affect the neighbouring amenity.
So as you can see, the top half of the screen is the street scene. So you've got on the left-hand side there at the top, you've got Highcroft Cottage. So you can see the height differences between them. There is a slight level change as you go up from Sleepers Hill to the rear of the site to where White House is existing, but it's not a significant change. We've also asked for a condition regarding the levels to ask for that detail after any application is approved. We would require that. I don't believe that there is a significant harmful impact to that amenity of that neighbouring property given the distance between the 2 dwellings.
And the ridge height of plot 3 and 5, and whether that's an average kind of ridge height that you would expect for that kind of house.
That is, I don't have the complete measurements. It's a couple of metres higher than the ridge height of Highcroft, but is a typical ridge height, yes. There are rooms in the roof of these properties as well.
Okay, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a follow-up really on the question I asked to the applicant, whether Mr. Lucas could, I understand 15-year sort of condition would be difficult to enforce, but whether we could add anything in specifically on those trees that are screening plot 1 to try and sort of keep them as close to the sort of supplementary plan document on Sleepers Hill as possible in regards to screening.
Yeah, I think it's a question of judgment ultimately for yourself, but without reciting the passage again, you all know the test that before you put conditions on, they should be kept to a minimum. The NPPF makes that quite clear. Paragraph 57, planning conditions should be kept to a minimum and only imposed where they're necessary, relevant to planning and development to be permitted, enforceable, precise, and the key one probably here for you is unreasonable in all other respects. Now, it's a question for your better judgment whether or not you feel it would be reasonable to increase that particular point to 15 years. Ultimately, the developer, when building out, has to walk away at some point, and then when these plots are sold, it becomes a private piece of land, a private purchase. 5 years seems reasonable. That's the normal baseline condition. When you extend it to 15 years and the developer's walked away from the site, should they be beholden to that particular condition? It then pushes it onto a private purchaser. Would that be reasonable? In my submission, I would probably say no. 5 years is probably where we say as a planning authority is the reasonableness here. And it ultimately becomes a matter of private maintenance as well. Would it be right for a condition to encroach upon someone who's perhaps quite particular about the outside appearance of a home compared to someone who perhaps likes that verdant greenery to grow? So you're encroaching perhaps upon people's preferences towards maintenance of their own hedgerows. So it's a question for your better judgment. I would probably say it would be unreasonable.
Councillor Langford-Smith.
Thank you, Chair. As a question for Mr. Lucas, really, policy NE15, which has been welcomed by the National Trust, I understand, specifies a 15-metre buffer to trees. The inspector also said that special trees might not be protected by a TPO, and it is not considered appropriate to restrict special trees to those that are protected by a TPO. I'm just concerned about the proximity of plots 1 and 2 to the trees. I'm not sure which ones actually are protected, but even if they're not protected, I'm still concerned about the proximity. So I'm sort of waiting to hear.
I don't think it's a question of law. Ultimately, this would have been consulted with the tree officers, the sort of trained arborists who know potentially about root protection areas, the type of trees, the species, the extent of their roots and how far they go deep into the ground or whether or not they splay out horizontally. Ultimately, it's the professional judgment of your arborists here, your tree officers. They've been consulted. I assume they've raised no particular objection in this regards. Therefore, there would be probably no impact given that the tree officers had looked at it. It is a criminal offence to, obviously, when you're building out, to place plant vehicles, particular machines during construction underneath the canopy of trees that have TPOs, tree preservation orders. It would be a criminal offence. So the construction management plan will probably deal with that going forwards about fencing off root protection areas, making sure that those trees are particularly protected during the construction phase. In terms of the siting, it's ultimately a question for your professional judgment for the tree officers.
Thank you. Councillor Laming.
Thank you. On the trees on the eastern boundary, how many of them are TPO'd?
I don't know the exact number, but I've shown you the plan of the TPO. So it's the small section. I don't know if you can see my mouse at the top of the site here by plot 2. Goes into the site there. Very slow mouse. The plot 1 and 2 are built outside the root protection zones of those trees. All those trees are on neighbouring land. They're not on the land of this site. So therefore, the owners or the potential owners of these properties can't just chop them down. They need permission from the neighbours and the owner of that site.
Yeah, the concern that I have is that when we looked at an application some time ago on Crossways, the tree wasn't TPO'd, and it was considered that the roots then would be trespassed as they go onto the other people's property, and therefore they could, any potential buyer, chop those roots off for their own purposes. And that gives me some concern on that, so I need some reassurance on that.
Yeah, councillor, so you have to realise as soon as a tree is has a tree preservation order, it's a criminal offence. So the criminal law will deal with that situation. Anyone that decides to chop, lop, destroy or willfully destroy, it's a criminal offence. So the criminal law deals with that, and planning can't really account for criminal actions and behaviours.
No, I wasn't actually looking at the TPO'd. I'm looking at the ones that aren't TPO'd. And how do we safeguard those? Because if their roots trespass onto the property, the owner is allowed to chop those roots off. So therefore, that could affect the health of those trees that are being considered.
Ultimately, those trees have been not considered worthy of a TPO. So it would be for the tree team to decide whether or not those trees that aren't TPO'd, if they warrant a TPO, then obviously the council has that power and prerogative to make TPOs. But currently you have TPOs on site and some that aren't. The ones that aren't TPO'd probably don't meet the test in terms of being noteworthy species or size.
Yeah, but they're part of a continuous line. That's really the point that I was making. The other thing I'm concerned about, and I'd like some reassurance, is permitted development rights. Are we allowing permitted development rights on these properties? Because they could actually go back into the tree line.
Permitted development rights have been removed by condition 20 for A, which is extensions, B and C, which is roof extensions, and E, which is outbuildings. So that does cover that, yes. Which is what the tree officer recommended as well in his comments.
It's clearly on the update sheet, Councillor Laming, and also condition 4 and the landscape.
Yeah, but we need some reassurance on what's going on. That's really what I'm asking.
I think it's all covered by conditions, to be fair. Councillor Gordon-Smith.
Yes, the new tree planting is going in on people's private ground. So are they at liberty to cut them down in due course? I mean,
and then they won't be TPO. There is a management. There will be there's a management condition that I've recommended as part of the update sheet, which will manage the landscaping of the area of the site. So that will cover the landscaping of those trees and keep them.
Even the ones on people inside people's gardens.
And the landscaping plan condition 4 recommends you need to keep the trees and landscaping alive for 5 years at least on those properties.
Yes, of course, I understand that, but 5 years and then the ownership changes. Someone says, I don't want that Irish Chanticleer in my garden.
We can't condition everything forever, I'm afraid.
I'm just trying to get a realistic view of the long-term use of the landscape. That was all.
And that's what was already discussed that Dan mentioned regarding the landscaping to the front regarding plot 1. But yes, we can't control what happens after that time. The residents could then cut those trees down. Yes.
Councillor White.
So yeah, it was a question about trees, but I think that's been answered. The other thing that was on my mind, it was mentioned by the ward councillors about a site visit. I don't think since I've been on this planning committee we've had a situation where we wanted to defer for a site visit. So I'm not really sure what the process would be, but if we felt like we didn't have enough information to make the decision today, would that be a possibility?
Yes, when we get to the end of this process, this part of the meeting, you can propose that. You'll need a seconder and then it'll be taken to the vote. I don't know how many of us have driven up and down Sleepers Hill and had a look. I certainly did. And I think that I got enough information from that and obviously the report and looking on Google Maps and all the rest of it to get a good idea of the area. Okay. Brian, Councillor Layman, did you have another question?
Yeah, I was just wondering about the comments that were made about bin store when they come to collect them once a week, because there will be a considerable number out onto the road, and I'm sure that Megan's considered this, and I'm just wondering what your thoughts were on that. Are we going to have a special area on the side of the road for these bins, because that road is rather narrow?
There's a designated bin store to the front of the site that the residents will put their bins within, and then this will be accessed by the bin people.
Good, so they won't need to go on the road. Right. Any more questions on our report numbers? Okay, so we now move to debate.
Yeah, so members, if you're minded to consider a site visit, I'd ask you not to debate the merits and show any support for or against. The question of whether or not a site visit is required should be put first. That way your views won't be predetermined, if you like. So yes, Councillor White, if you give your rationale reasons, you'll need a seconder, and then that can be put to the vote on that issue.
Well, I'll suggest it anyway. So I did drive past and it was difficult to see, like I said, the level changes across the site and also the feasibility of plot 1 and how that would fit within that, as Councillor Thompson said about it looks like it's squeezed in on the plans. So I think by actually visiting the site, I'd have a better idea of how that fits in. So I would like to suggest that.
Okay, we do have to start the whole process from the beginning again. We can't just pick up again where we've left off here. If we have a site visit, then it has to go on to the next agenda and start from scratch. Okay, do we have a seconder for Councillor White's proposal for a site visit? No. So if there's no seconder, that proposal falls and we move to debate, members. Councillor Langford-Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I didn't know this area at all, so I went and did a site visit myself on Tuesday. Looking up the drive and looking at the height of the trees on the eastern boundary, I couldn't see how you could possibly fit houses in there and not affect the trees. I've also looking at the technical arboricultural report, which says that the principal concerns rest at plots 1 and 2, where there is around 2 metres of space between the eastern elevations and the plot boundary. Then large growing trees such as the beech and aspen poplars, recorded as being around 20 metres in height, stand 5 metres from the garden boundaries. With living rooms on the ground floor and bedrooms and bathrooms on the first floor, all facing east onto a garden fence and the tree canopy, it is likely that the occupiers of these dwellings would feel that the adjacent trees would be an unreasonable risk and be overbearing to their domestic activities. And that is a concern of mine. I know when I've seen previous developments where trees have been in reasonably close proximity, there are applications almost immediately for those trees to be pruned or felled. And as has been stated, some of these trees don't have TPOs on, so I do feel that they would be at risk, but I will listen to the rest of the debate before I make up my mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I do think this is a difficult decision in regards to plot 1 and plot 2 specifically. I don't think that that any of the plots will be overbearing because it is well screened on all sort of 3 sides. I do have concerns about the eastern boundary. We often, even in regards to the trees that are the TPO'd, we do often get applications for those to be felled due to, say, in 15 years' time, damage to properties. So that does have some concerns that I raise. I don't think that the overall number of dwellings is overdevelopment. I think it's quite appropriate. However, the plot 1 and 2 being quite close to that eastern boundary do give me concerns. I do welcome that there is over 50% of properties that are 2 or 3 beds, but those eastern boundary plots do give me some concerns still. So I'm undecided at the moment.
Councillor Gordon-Smith.
Thank you. Yes, I have a lot of concerns about this. Just looking at the plan, you can see how the driveway has been squeezed in past plot 1. I mean, hue and horn is how I would describe it. I also feel that the landscape officer has given a fairly distinct opinion about it, which I am tempted to agree with. And I think also the Sleeper Hill design statement, I think we try to encourage local groups to become involved in these issues. And there's a fairly distinctive character which is going to be damaged by it. So I don't think, in all honesty, I can support this at its current density.
Councillor Laming.
Thank you, Chair. This is quite a difficult one. I have a great deal of sympathy with the views of Councillor Thompson in regard to this particular area, but my main concern is that there is an awful lot of properties being shoehorned into a very tight space, which is made worse by the plots 1 and 2 being so close to those trees. And I think that's just going to be an inherent problem in the ongoing future, because people will want to chop those trees down or remove them or reduce the height, and we need to keep the character of the area, which I don't feel that this does. So I cannot support this. I'm sorry.
Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. I also have serious concerns about the plots 1 and 2, echoed by our landscape and arboricultural officers, and the future survivability, I have to say, also of the tree line behind these houses. The 15-year photograph projection is not credible in my view, as the tree growth will either inundate the properties, leaving them with no sunlight at all, or, as I suspect, be cut right back or felled after a successful future TPO and non-TPO planning application, again on the grounds of the right to light. As a result, I think this is an development and I cannot support it.
Councillor Pett.
Thank you, Chair. The design statement, yes, 18 years old. I remember Chilbolton Avenue had a design statement as well about 20 years ago. And driving down Chilbolton Avenue 20 years ago and driving down it now, it's a very different place. So I therefore have some sympathy with both the ward members and the objectors. That said, the world hasn't fallen apart since Chilbolton Avenue changed. We are in a housing crisis and we do need more dwellings. I would like some advice, please, because I do share the concerns of plots that have been expressed about plots 1 and 2. The orientation of the property relative to the trees and the almost inevitable consequence that those trees will not be there in 5 or 10 years' time. Whether that is a valid reason to go against the officer's recommendation, I don't know, and I would like some advice, please, on what is acceptable legally in terms of what we can do about those trees, please.
Councillor Cunningham, your microphone's still on. Could you switch it off, please? Thank you.
Right, Chair.
If I could just, we'll come back to that query, officers, at the end of debate, if that's all right. In my view, we do have the view of our tree officer, who, having seen that those smaller dwellings, they are just chalet bungalows, have been taken further away from the tree root protection areas, is content that they will not now impact the trees. I accept that possibly in the future, people will feel that they are overbearing the trees at the back of the houses, but buyer beware, you know, you're buying a house which is being built underneath mature trees, and that's something that you should celebrate and enjoy and not complain about when the crows crow in the morning or whatever. In terms of the local area design statement, I hugely support LADs and think that they're a great thing, but they do need to be kept up to date. And I'm sorry, this one's 18 years old, 2007. Whilst I respect and value still its contribution, I do think it needs updating. And if this came to a planning inspector, I'm afraid that I've asked our officers how much weight we should give to an 18-year-old local area design statement. And they said, well, really, the value of these things does drop off with time. And I can't see an inspector taking very much notice of it, I have to say. And as Councillor Pett said, you know, this isn't 2007, this is 2025, nearly 2026. We live in a different world. We have a huge housing crisis. We have enormous pressure from the national government on us as a council to find space for more housing. And that pressure is only going to grow. And if we turn down applications like this without serious planning reasons for doing so, I think we're building up all sorts of problems for ourselves in the future. So given that our officers are recommending approval and that have looked at all those issues, I've driven up and down Slopers Hill. I don't think it will look out of place at all, certainly from the road. Obviously there will be an impact on local residents, but I'm afraid that's the way of the world at the moment. So I will be supporting our officers. Is there anybody else who wishes to contribute to debate? So do you want to have a legal answer to that question before we take the vote, Councillor Pett?
Well, I think enough would just be confirmation of what you just said, that it's really caveat emptor, isn't it? That if you buy a house that's that close to trees, so therefore market forces take control of the situation. But if there is something we could do, then that would be.
I mean, maybe local councils could go along and ask for TPOs on all the rest of the trees. I mean, that's something that local people could initiate.
Chair, perhaps I can help. So the trees I think of concern are those from the driveway and the access. Now, if we look at the landscape plan, and okay, we cannot see it particularly that well on the slide, but the bin store, which is actually at the access way, you'll see on the landscape plan, there's 2 proposed trees going in at the bin store area. Now, those trees look like they will not be within plot 1's gift. They're going to be actually in the bin store area. So if you look at the access, you can see the 2 trees I'm talking about. Probably, Megan, if you bring it down to the south of the site, the cursor. Right on the corner, that's the bin store area. And there's 2 canopies you can see there. And it's marked on the landscape plan as D, and the key on that particular plan says proposed large canopy trees to bolster street scene along Sleepers Hill. Now they're actually on the zoomed up plan. You can see they're going to be on the bin store area. Now there's a question whether or not the bin store will be conveyed to the purchaser of plot 1. We don't know, but there's a reasonable assumption that that bin store will probably be part of the management condition. So those trees will not be probably within the gift of the owner of plot 1 to actually clip, chop, lop, foul. So they will be there. Okay, I can't answer about all the other trees. I'll answer partial. Sorry, I can't deliver everything, but that's what's on the plan. You can see those 2 canopy trees at the access way. They're in the bin store area.
Okay,
so they won't be
within
the gift of plot 1.
Plan. All right. Okay. Right. Okay. I think we've had all the debate we're going to get. So we come to the decision. So this application is recommended for approval by our officers. So can I see all those in favour of approval, please?
3.
4. And those against?
3.
And those abstaining?
Let's get it right. Okay, so thanks again, please show.
Sorry, let's start that again. Can I see all those in favour of the application?
4.
Those against the application?
4.
And those who are abstaining? 1. Okay. So I will cast my casting vote the way I voted in the first place, and I'm afraid that application is approved. Thank you. We will now go straight to item number 7 on our agendas. If we could just have a couple of minutes whilst the officers change over. Members, if we could settle down, please. So we now move to item number 7 on our agenda, which is interesting. Is it Knowsley Hoe Road, Bishop's Waltham? And it's for the demolition of a dwelling. And our presenting officer is Ethan Townsend. So over to you, Ethan, for your presentation, please.
Thank you. Good morning, committee members. As discussed, this is for Knowsley Hoe Road, and it is for the demolition of a dwelling house. As you'll see throughout the next coming slides, there is no proposed plans for the site after the demolition, so this application solely considers the demolition of the dwelling house alone. First, I provided you with an aerial showing where the application site is, so it's the one etched in red, and as you can see, it's in the settlement boundary of Bishop's Waltham. To the east, if you can see my cursor, the edge of the settlement's over here, so then you've got agricultural fields. Obviously heading west, you've got further dwellings within the settlement boundary. The site's to the north of Hoe Road, near the junction with Rareridge Lane, and it's a detached bungalow. Yeah, so as you can see from the red line plan, the property itself is a detached bungalow located to the north with a detached garage. The properties from Four Farthings to the beaches are all similarly sized detached bungalows, but obviously to the south you've got larger plots of detached two-storey dwelling houses. So there's some variety to the character and appearance of the area. As I've discussed, because it's for the demolition of a house and solely for the demolition of a house alone, there are no plans provided. So I've jumped straight into site visit photographs. So the application site is this bungalow here with the dormer. The entrance to the site is here. So as you can see from the front of the site, it's got a large hedgerow screening it from the road. It's a fairly modest bungalow that's sort of typical of bungalows within this small section of area along Hoe Road. Then again, this is looking westbound, so towards the settlement from outside of the settlement boundary, the countryside coming into the settlement of Bishop's Waltham. You can't actually see the dwelling very well from here at all, so it's all the way over here. But as you can see, I just want to show a photograph sort of showing the dense sort of vegetation located at the front of each plot along this part of the road. Then here you can see photographs of the site. So on the top left, that's actually my car parked in the access. So as you can see now, the site hasn't been looked after very well in the last couple of years. The vegetation to the front is really quite dense. You can't see from the front on, you can't see the property at all. The top right photo is looking back eastwards of the site, and the bottom left is still looking towards the site, fairly straight on from the other side, from the southern side of Hoe Road. And the bottom right photo shows neighbouring property. So I sort of wanted to show you that there is similarities between neighbouring properties, all of which are detached sort of chalet bungalows, modest bungalows. Then here we've got some photographs of the actual site itself. So as you can see, it's a brick-built detached bungalow that's not been looked after. As of present, it's not currently inhabited, as you can probably tell from the photographs. So it does need some. Well, it's not the most tidy site. Let's say that. Yeah. So the proposal will be for the demolition of the house. Let's see, and then I've got some internal photographs of the site just to show the state of the site. In my opinion, obviously the site could still be habitable, but that's not necessarily a consideration. But these photographs just show the state of which it's currently in. So as you can see, it's fairly overgrown with vines growing inside, and there's some water damage from leaking. This yet again shows just the damage that's occurred inside the property. So you've got some loose roof tiles on the right, and you've got some water damage to the left. Yeah, thank you for listening to my presentation. The recommendation is to approve as it complies with the local plan policies as set out within my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ethan. So we now turn to our public speakers, and the first one is Emma Horton, objector, if you'd like to come forward. Ms. Horton, thank you very much for coming along. So you will have up to 3 minutes, and the microphone will come on if you press the button on the base unit. And if you could just stay at the end in case we've got any questions of clarification. Members may have questions of clarification for you at the end if that's okay. So over to you, 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm here to speak on behalf of a number of local residents affected by the application to demolish Knowsley. I'm sure the committee has read the 60 objection comments, but I would like to highlight discrepancies within the application that were raised by residents that have not been addressed in the planning officer's report. The application describes Knowsley as an unlivable house that was last in use a few years ago. This is factually incorrect. The property was sold in August 2022 for £850,000 by a family who lived there and was then rented out until January 2024. This is just 14 months before this application was submitted. A property occupied so recently cannot reasonably be described as long-term uninhabitable. Residents understand that the current owners inherited the property and do not live locally. If the building has genuinely declined to an uninhabitable state within such a short period, this raises understandable concerns about the level of maintenance carried out since it was last occupied. A property is only considered uninhabitable when it fails to meet the standards set out in the Housing Act 2004 and the Homes Fitness for Human Habitation Act 2018, which includes requirements relating to damp and mould, heating, structural integrity, plumbing, electrical safety, sanitation and general safety hazards. The fact that tenants lived there until recently indicates that these basic standards must have been met at that time. A further concern is that this is a standalone demolition application with no accompanying plans for redevelopment of the site. This is highly unusual, particularly for a property of this scale and value. Typically, demolition proposals are brought forward alongside a clear, integrated plan for the future use of the land. Without such a plan, the long-term purpose of the site, the environmental implications and the impact on local character remain uncertain. Even the planning officer during a site visit noted that this situation was unusual. These facts have not been addressed within the planning officer's report to the committee, and I think it is essential that you are aware of the details of the timeline of ownership and occupancy, since this is different to that presented in the application. I therefore respectfully request that the committee refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And do members have any questions of clarification for our objector? No? Okay, thank you very much. If you could just switch the mic off as you go. Thank you. So now we turn to the supporter, Mitchell Curtis. No, don't have a Mitchell Curtis here. Okay, no supporter. Right, so we move to back to you, Ethan. Do you have any anything to add since following our public?
Yeah, there's a few things that I will add. Obviously, we're assessing the application under the Town and Country Planning Act, so other acts like the Housing Acts are not material planning considerations in this instance. As set out in my report, that we don't have a policy specific on demolition of dwelling houses. So the state of whether it's habitable or not isn't really a necessary consideration. What we need to consider is whether the demolition in principle is acceptable. And we do that based on what's mentioned in the report: ecology grounds, neighbouring amenity grounds, character and appearance grounds. So they're sort of the considerations that I've set out. I will admit, obviously, it's unusual to not have any further plans, but what we can only consider based on what's been provided to us. As set out within the report and as part of the conditions, we have requested further information for how the site is going to look after the demolition and details on how it's going to be demolished to ensure that neighbours aren't going to be impacted by the proposal itself.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we now turn to questions on the report. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. It is mentioned in your report, Ethan, but I was just wondering if you could just highlight the fallback position should we refuse this application, specifically highlighting what they could do under permitted development rights.
Yeah, so this application is for a full application, and they could, within their own right, submit a prior approval application, which effectively, having looked at the requirements of class, let me look at it, Part 11, Class B of the GDPO deals with demolition of buildings. The requirements are very relaxed on that. So if they submit a prior approval to us, it probably would be approved fairly instantly without all the considerations that I've already gone through this report. The only requirements that they are required to submit is to confirm how it's going to be demolished and a site restoration plan, which I've added as a condition on this application anyway. So that there is, while it's not necessarily a fallback position because we don't know that they're going to do that, that is still a consideration we can weigh into consideration, if that makes sense.
So do you consider that there are advantages from a sort of planning perspective in having it approved through this route, and that we can put conditions and so on?
Yeah, definitely. I think we've added additional conditions which wouldn't be required by the prior approval process. Plus, you know, we've been able to assess the ecological impacts of the proposal through the submission of ecological reports, which then we've attached additional conditions on external lighting, for example, during demolition, which wouldn't have been possible under the prior approval procedure. So there's definitely benefits of it being handled this way. But yeah, like I said, a fallback position depends on the likelihood of whether or not it's going to happen. So I wouldn't necessarily call it a fallback position per se, but it is definitely a consideration that we note that they could easily do this under permitted development, should this not be approved.
Thank you. Councillor Langford-Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I think, Ethan, you confirmed it, but we're not allowed to consider anything other than what's in front of us. So we can't consider what it could be or what could come forward to us. So no crystal ball.
Yeah, I will say unfortunately we can't do that. Obviously, we can't speculate how they're going to use it in the future. The one thing I will say, just for reassurance, obviously, for whatever the purpose they want to use it for in the future, you know, if they want to build a new dwelling, if it wants to be used for any other purpose, that will have to be included in an application in its own right. If there's a change of use of the site, or if there's new operational development, i.e., especially if they demolish the house, that they will no longer have PD rights under Part 1 of the GDPO schedule, i.e. they couldn't build obviously an extension because the house wouldn't be there, but they wouldn't be able to build an outbuilding or anything either because there's no dwelling house in which it relates. So any new operational development, i.e. buildings, structures, would require consent in their own right if the site was to be used for any other purpose apart from, technically, because its lawful purpose if this was demolished would be residential garden land. So if it was used for any other purpose outside of that, it would require consent in its own right. And obviously the details of that would be submitted at another application stage. So yeah, in short, we have to consider primarily the principle of demolition.
Councillor Small.
Thank you, Chair. My question was about Sill. Assuming something will want to get built on here in the future, how does the fact that it's already been demolished and returned to a blank site, like if somebody came forward with self-build, normally if you've started work on site, you then can't apply for a Sill exemption. It doesn't apply. I'm just trying to establish if they then put in an application for a house, will they be liable for Sill because work has technically started? Do we know?
I can't say that I'm an expert on Sill myself. Obviously, if any works have commenced without requiring consent, obviously that instantly would then be Sill liable. But obviously there are Sill exemptions. I don't know them off the top of my head, in all honesty. But yeah, it's not necessarily relevant to this application per se, but for the future, yeah, there could be instances where development could be liable, but also there could be instances where development could be exempt. It depends on the type of development proposed in the future.
Well, that's all speculation and nothing to do with this application. Councillor Pett and then Councillor Lamy.
Thank you, Chair. I note your comments in the report about the change to the overall landscape of the street scene because you're taking out one dwelling. Is there can you just confirm for me that there's nothing in our local plan that prevents, that would allow us to object on the basis that we're losing one dwelling of our housing stock here in a time of housing crisis, as we were just talking about earlier?
Yeah, there's nothing in the local plan that would specifically allow that to be a reason for refusal, I would say. I think the only grounds, if you were to refuse it on, would really be character and amenity grounds. But other than that, I can't see any reason, because of the limited scope of what's actually being proposed here, I can't see any other reason that we could object to it on any basis.
Thank you, councillor Laming.
Yeah, just a quick clarification. In here, we're asking for a 10% biodiversity gain. So if they then decide to put in a planning application in a year's time, would they have to go up 10% above that level at that point?
Yeah, I mean, any future application would still be required, they'd still have to require the BNG net gain unless it's exempt. So obviously there's set exemptions within the biodiversity net gain regulation. As exemptions, for example, you know, self-build would be exempt. So if they came in with a self-build, that would likely be exempt. So we wouldn't be able to pursue that 10% net gain. But yeah, so it really is, it's hard to say because we don't know how they're going to use it in the future. But in theory, yes, obviously any proposed development, the starting point is that we would expect that to then include a BNG of 10%. But we have to figure out exactly what they're proposing, because otherwise it could potentially be exempt. So it's hard to answer. But does that make sense? Or?
Yeah. So what you're really saying then is they decided to go for self-build at a later stage, they wouldn't have to comply with the 10% increase in net gain.
This is all speculation, which is completely irrelevant because
No,
it's
it's
not
not.
to do with this application.
Yeah,
Is it?
this is what we're talking about, the biodiversity gain in this application and how we're enforcing.
I think that's been answered, councillor Laming. Thank you very much. Sorry. Thank you. Okay, if we have no more questions, we move to debate. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. What I'm about to mention has nothing to do with this application, but may clarify for members why there is such objection to this specific application. The emerging local plan has an allocation of 100 dwellings in Bishop's Waltham, with this site as the proposed access to those dwellings. However, that is nothing that we can consider in this application today. However, I think it's important context to why there is such opposition to this house being demolished. So unfortunately, that is no consideration that we can take into account regarding this application today. Again, looking at what, if we were to refuse this, the applicant could submit prior approval for the demolition. If that were the case, we wouldn't have any conditions, we wouldn't have any biodiversity net gain or conditions as Ethan has mentioned. So we are tied at this point. There is no policy in our local plan that could refuse this application. So I'll be supporting the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Gordon-Smith.
Well, thank you, Councillor Williams, who's answered the why, which was the first thing that popped into my head. Why pull down a perfectly decent house of some value? You've explained it. I think we've been explained to us. There's nothing. We don't have any. If we refuse to have the demolition, it can be done anyway. But I would say it's tragic that a perfectly acceptable house, as at a time when our very wise chair has pointed out the pressure for housing need, and the perfectly acceptable one is pulled down. However, I think we have to accept it.
Councillor White.
Yeah, similar sentiment really. It's a shame that there aren't any policies regarding the embodied carbon in the house as well, and a perfectly habitable house being knocked down and the environmental impact of that. But that, again, we can't reject it on that basis.
Thank you. So if there's no more debate, we turn to the decision. So this application is recommended for approval. Can I see those who approve, please? That's all members. Thank you very much. So that application is approved. Thank you. We'll now take a short break and return at 11:10. Right, members, we return to our agenda for planning committee today with number 8, item number 8, which is an application for a variation in the original planning conditions at Unit 4F Whiteley Shopping Centre. And our presenting officer is Joe Toole. Over to you, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So just for a means of clarification, this application was triggered to planning committee at a request of Councillor Actual due to the number of objections. And there's also an update on condition 14 to relate to the proposed new operation hours for this unit as well. So this application is to vary the condition to extend the operation hours of unit F4 to 8 AM in the morning till midnight all days. The original permission is 7 AM to 11 PM Monday to Saturday and 10 AM to 10 PM Sunday and bank holidays as well. So in terms of the context, this shows the location plan of the site of the original permission. Where my cursor here is the cinema complex that was granted. And the wider site relates to the Whiteley Shopping Centre. So this shows a close-up of the actual unit F4 labelled in red here, outlined in red. In terms of it shows its placement, it's on the ground floor with the cinema unit above. This shows the aerial photograph of the site, which again you can see the surrounding geographies with the car parks positioned to the north, and then further residential properties along that on Bluebell Way, and then also to the south is a recreational park, and there's also other residential properties here as well to the west. This shows the unit layout. Here you can see unit 4. It is important to note that unit 6 and 7 here got permission at a later date to operate till 11:30 at night and 7 AM in the morning, Monday to Saturdays, and 10 AM to 11 Sundays and bank holidays, which is different to the separate units here as well. This outlines the distances from neighbouring properties. Again, you can see there's a car parks in between. So with the application submitted, there was a premise management plan provided that outlined mitigations for neighbour impact on the surrounding properties. And these are some of the key headlines outlined within that report of how they would control any form of neighbour nuisance. So see here, there'll be no amplified music, there'll be limited capacity on numbers, there'd be controlled operation hours as via this condition. There'll be staff training to limit noise when customers are arriving and leaving the premises. And there'll be no tolerance on bad behaviour or loitering outside of the operation hours of the business as well. This just shows the unit here. So it's the previous Jurassic Grill that gained permission to be a Wetherspoons. It's also important to note that a licensing permission was granted on the site as well to limit the supply of alcohol to no later than 11:30, and that was approved on their end. And the Council's Environment Agency also commented on the application, outlining no objection in accordance with the premise management plan, which has been conditioned to this application as well, as referring to condition 19. But as per the officer's recommendation, it is recommended to be approved subject to the conditions outlined within the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. We now turn to public speaking, and our first public speaker is the objector, David Leslie. Mr. Leslie, good morning. You will have up to 3 minutes, and the microphone is turned on by pressing the button on the base, and the timer will start when you start speaking. Thank you.
Hi, I'll be very brief. I've got no objection to Wetherspoons coming to Whiteley. I'm a Wackley resident of 3 years standing. The row of restaurants there is very buzzy in the early evening, but one of the factors about Wackley is it's a town consisting largely of young families. 79%, according to the 2001 census, are people below the age of 40 years. It's not a town you would come to looking for nightlife. It's very, very quiet. At 11 p.m, I was there last night. I saw 2 people in that whole retail section, and that they were people coming out of the restaurants which had closed. They were staff. I can't imagine why Wetherspoons wants to have extended licensing hours through to midnight, and people leaving the premises will be heading home after midnight. I don't think it's appropriate for this time. It's as simple as that. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, do we have any questions of clarification? No? Lovely. Thank you very much. And if you could just switch the microphone off as you go. Thank you. We now have Parish Councillor Mike Evans. Mr. Evans, good morning. And you also have up to 3 minutes for your contribution, and you know the routine, don't you? Thank you.
Madam Chairman, good morning. Whiteley, with the North Whiteley development, as you know, is an ever-growing town with a thriving shopping centre owned by British Land, and includes several restaurants and a cinema, attracting 7.1 million visits last year. It is an integral part of the Whiteley community, and the Town Council works very closely with the local management team, and in principle we see Wetherspoons as a welcome addition. Having said that, the proposal to extend Wetherspoons licensing hours to midnight on all days, including Sunday and public holidays, is not supported by the Town Council. And we fully agree with the concerns expressed by Councillor Ackwell in her representation to the licensing subcommittee hearing. The main objections are from those residents who live close to the main restaurants, including Unit 4 and the cinema. Like many other similar areas, we occasionally suffer from antisocial behaviour late at night in the surrounding car parks and residential areas, and we do not wish to see this potential increase, especially as alcohol is usually the contributing factor. All of the restaurants serving alcohol in Whiteley close their doors at 11:30, and to extend the closing hours for one restaurant to midnight sets an unwelcome precedent, and it increases the risk of noise, nuisance and further antisocial behaviour. If this application is approved, then it could well lead to other restaurants seeking to extend their hours of operation, and this would not be popular with the residents. While the officers in their report state that the proposed hours for Wetherspoons would align closely with those of McDonald's and the cinema, that may well be the case. But the overriding issue here is that neither McDonald's nor the cinema serve alcohol. As I said previously, alcohol is normally a contributing factor in the majority of our antisocial behaviour. I'm afraid the Town Council does not share the view that the proposed increase in trading hours for Wetherspoons will not have a limited and acceptable impact on the local area. Feelings, I have to say, are running pretty high in some residential areas, and if this extension of operating hours is approved, Wetherspoons is likely to be avoided by many local residents. Finally, I think it's significant that there appears to be no statements in the planning documents from British Land, the owners of the shopping centre, supporting this extension of licensing hours for Wetherspoons. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, do we have any questions of clarification? So I've got a quick one. So you're representing the parish council who've discussed this and agreed that they want to object to the increase in opening hours, yes?
Yes, Town Council took a view on this, yes, when we discussed it.
Because we've been told that there aren't many objections, but in fact,
well, They may not, excuse me, they may not have written in, but I can assure you, I've had a lot of objections. And people are quite angry about it.
Okay.
I mean, the point is we've got it under control as it is at the moment. It's all right saying there's a plan in place, but when they push them out of the restaurant, they push them into the local area.
Okay, I think you've made your point very well. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
If you could switch off the microphone as you go, thank you. Now, the ward councillor, Councillor Ashwell, is unable to come, so I'm going to read out her statement. If you could put the timer up for me, Claire, for 5 minutes, it won't take that long. So this is Vivian Ashwell's contribution. Apologies, I'm unable to attend the planning committee today as I have a mayoral event to attend in Winchester Cathedral. Thank you to the planning officers for agreeing for this item to be heard at the planning committee. As a council, we definitely are not against businesses opening in our district. We actively encourage it. But my objection to this application is the proposed late opening hours, serving alcohol until 11:30 p.m, then closing hours at midnight. There are 2 other units in the same complex, Nando's and Bar and Block. They also sell alcohol, but both close at 2200 hours. The nearest pub to the proposed Wetherspoons is the Parsons Collar, approximately 1 mile away, and that closes at 11 p.m. There are several homes with within meters of this proposed drinking establishment, and I'm extremely concerned about the possible antisocial behaviour that might occur if the pub is allowed to close at midnight, with car doors banging, people shouting, etc., etc. I know that Whiteley Town Council also do not support the extension of the proposed opening hours. So I would like the committee to object to these opening hours until midnight so as to prevent a public nuisance and to keep the opening hours to no later than 11 p.m. Thank you. And that was Councillor Ashwell's contribution. Now, obviously, we can't ask her questions for clarification, so we will move on to the supporter, Jamie Piper. Thank you very much, Councillor Evans. Mr. Piper, good morning. And you also have up to 3 minutes, and the microphone is turned on by pressing the button on the base of the unit, and the timer will start when you start speaking. So if you could remember to switch on the microphone. Perfect, thank you.
Many thanks, Chair. I'm here today on behalf of my client JD Wetherspoon in support of their application to extend the hours of opening at the unit they're looking to occupy at Whiteley Shopping Centre. I'm sure many of you are familiar with JD Wetherspoon, which started in 1979 and is going to be one of the UK's most popular public house chains. In more recent times, food sales has become a significant part of their trade. In many locations, this surpasses drink sales. By way of example, a key part of the business is the sale of breakfasts, with 34 million being served in the year up to July 2024. Wetherspoons have public houses in a variety of locations, including city centres, airports, holiday camps, market towns and within residential suburbs, and in all instances have well-established management practices which ensure that they are well run and allow them to be a good neighbour. In some of their locations, they have residential properties either immediately adjacent or above their premises, and they have proven themselves to be compatible with such environments. They also have successfully operated public houses adjacent to a number of other sensitive neighbours, including churches and even a chapel of rest. In respect of this site, it has been noted that there have been some concerns from local residents, but as is noted in your officer's report, these properties are a considerable distance away with a car park in between them. Furthermore, within the shopping centre, there are a couple of other operators, including McDonald's and the cinema, which trade later than that being applied for by Wetherspoon. In terms of the proposed hours of 8 AM to midnight, this incorporates a 30-minute drinking up period, during which time there will be no further sales. This approach is one element of the established management practices, which is particularly helpful in busier city centre locations, as it allows gradual dispersal of customers at the end of the evening, but works equally well across the wider portfolio, including locations such as this. In addition to this measure, the application is accompanied by a detailed management plan, which your officers are proposing is secured via a planning condition. This includes details of taxi protocols, zero tolerance on bad behaviour, limiting capacity and no amplified music. Whilst noting the local concerns, I can provide assurance that Wetherspoons are experienced in ensuring good behaviour within their premises, with this having a direct result on the behaviour outside of the premises, and it is to be noted that your environmental health team have no objection to the proposals. Furthermore, as a separate layer of control, the proposals will have a premises licence, which ensures robust management practices are upheld in addition to those covered within the management plan, so the council will maintain a good degree of control in perpetuity. I hope that this background is of assistance to your consideration of these proposals, and I therefore respectfully ask that you support your officer's recommendation and grant planning permission. Thank you.
Well done on the timing. Thank you very much indeed. Members, do we have any questions of clarification for Mr. Piper? Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Piper, we've heard from a number of objectors of the timings of the closure from midnight is not acceptable. Would you be prepared as their representative of Wetherspoons to look at closing time at, say, 11:30?
Sorry, I'm actually quite deaf. Would you mind just saying that a bit louder? Apologies.
As representative of Wetherspoons, would you be prepared to look at a earlier closing time of about 11:30 then?
I haven't got the authority to agree to that, I'm afraid. I know that Wetherspoons are very much would like to operate this until midnight. As I mentioned in my presentation, sales of alcohol and food would stop before that, and inbuilt into that period of midnight is a 30-minute drinking up time. So nothing would be sold during that window and would allow for the gradual dispersal of people. That 30-minute window is applied to all of the pubs in their portfolio.
So effectively, they stop selling drinks at 11:30. Okay, any more questions of clarification, members? Councillor Langford-Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Do other Wetherspoons operate reduced hours, or is it standard across every Wetherspoon that you basically close by midnight?
Yes, some Wetherspoons do operate different hours to here at the shopping centre. So in city centre locations, for example, there are pubs that will operate till 1:30 in the morning. Conversely, there are ones like this. So the midnight closing time is at kind of the lower end of when they would typically operate their public houses.
Thank you very much indeed for your time. Thank you. Okay, so we come back to you, Joe, for any updates following our contributions from the public.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a clarification on the later permission from the original, which allowed unit F7 and F6 to operate till 11:30, which actually, you see here, these are the two units who actually have a closer relationship to the neighbouring properties on that section. So yeah, they may not actually operate those times, but that's what permission has been allowed for, that they could go up to if they needed to or wanted to. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go to general questions on the report. Could I just ask, it might be a legal question on the licensing of the premises, Daniel, but if there were issues arising from this later closing time, which made neighbours complain about noise and so on, what redress would there be, and could there be an appeal to the licensing committee to change those hours?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, Chair. So you've got parallel regimes here. You've got the Licensing Act of 2003 and obviously what we're considering Town and Country Planning Act of 1990. Now, under the licensing regime, there's a different, if you like, yardstick to assess an application. Those of you who are licensing subcommittee, obviously, you know those principles. The four key licensing objectives are prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, prevention of public nuisance, and protection of children from harm. So if at any point there was a concern about low-level crime, antisocial behaviour, gathering, loitering, littering, so on and so forth, then nearby residents will have the ability to send that licence immediately to review. That is to say, one individual can call for that particular licence to be reviewed by this council's licensing subcommittee. Now, obviously, it would have to be evidence-based over a period of time, showing a breach of that particular licensing objective. But there is that ability in the Licensing Act to call a individual premises license to review to account for what that individual group of representatives, or indeed the town council, or anyone, the police, for example, trading standards, if there's underage sales, they all have that ability to call into question the license. Your yardstick, as you're all aware, is the development plan. You have to assess planning applications in accordance with the development plan, unless material considerations suggest otherwise. What you're being tasked with is ultimately a change in the actual baseline provision to what is being applied for, i.e. from the baseline, which they could operate, would there be material planning harm, which I believe it's an extra hour they're asking for. Now, it would be perhaps within your gift to look at how that extra hour can amount to planning harm, but you won't have, if you like, any instance or any evidence to suggest. It would be hypothetical. It would be crystal ball. So you would have to assess it based upon amenity provisions and the amenity provisions in the local plan, and illustrating how that extra hour shows a breach of the development plan in terms of amenity provisions, which Joe's report takes into account. But you're right, Chair. There is the ability to review the licence if there are any breaches of those licensing objectives.
Thank you for that clarification on the licensing legal front. Okay, any other questions, members, on the report? No? So we move to debate. Councillor Williams. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think it's quite clear that our sort of we don't have that lever that licensing does to sort of call in or object in this case on planning merits. However, on the licensing side, they do have that lever. I mean, we have the chair of licensing with us today who may want to contribute as well. But from the planning side, that there isn't planning policy reasons that we could reasonably justify to refuse this application. However, on the licensing side, there is that call-in aspect that can happen in the future should there be increased noise, disturbance, crime. So I'll be supporting the application.
Thank you. Councillor Laming.
Yeah, I think it was useful that our legal advisor stipulated the difference being chairman of licensing. It is a fine line, and we do have the ability to call it in at any time on evidence based. So there is that safeguard there. The question that I have in my mind is, would this give this business an unfair advantage to the rest of the businesses around it, which are closing earlier, and whether that outweighs the benefit. So I'll sit and listen to everybody else's opinion on this.
Thank you. Councillor Gordon-Smith.
Yes, I take your point about an advantage given to the other, an advantage over the other businesses, but most of the other ones like Nando's, I think, are more food orientated. And as I live within 100 metres of one pub and 150 metres of probably about 3 others, yeah, you can get people shouting at night, but it's very much down to the landlords to control misbehaviour. And I think Wetherspoons, they are very professional in their approach. They're not the sort of one-man band pub. So I can't see any good reason to turn this down.
Thank you. Councillor Pett.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I rather agree with Councillor Gordon-Smith. I find it quite odd to object on the basis that somebody sees no reason why this extension is needed. It's a business. It's a business that, as every other business in this country, is trying to grow at the moment. I note as part of the licensing license grant that a condition was placed on them to have a a phone line for complaints after hours, or during opening hours, if there were incidents in the vicinity. I quite agree that Wetherspoons, by and large, is a very well-run company and is used to dealing with these situations. I can see no good reason why we shouldn't grant this this planning application on that basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I too will be supporting the application, but I do sympathise and understand what you were talking about. It is a lot of young families live in that area, and I'm sure that the representative from Wetherspoons will have listened to the debate and will take away the extreme concern of some local residents that their generally peaceful evenings shouldn't be shattered by their customers leaving in a unruly state, shall we say. But there is redress. So if it is a problem, you know, that you can come back to the licensing committee, who have rather more skin in the game, as they say. So I will be supporting the recommendation. So if there's no more debate, members, we turn to the decision. So this application is recommended for approval. Can I see all those in favour of approval, please?
9 unanimous.
That's all members. So that application is approved. And we will go straight on to the next item. But just give us a couple of minutes to swap over the presenting officer. Thank you very much. All right, members, we now move on to the final item on this morning's agenda, number 9, which is an application on land adjacent to Church Lane in Swanmore. And our presenting officer is Lisa Booth. So over to you, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just draw your attention to a number of updates in the update sheet. There's a couple of errors in report. Additional line in condition 4 added that should be only used for agriculture, and then informative 15, and then there was an additional objection comments from a neighbour, Old Hill Farm, which are just laid out for points, additional points raised. So this site before us is a 4.7 hectare holding consisting of a long established fruit orchard and a small area of field that's used for hay production. It's located off Church Lane in Swanmore, and it has Droxford Road running along the eastern boundary. Public right of way runs across the site from Vicarage Lane, so I think it's shown on this one here. So this is the public right of way. So this is Vicarage Lane. Public right of way runs through the orchard here and then out onto Droxford Lane. The site's enclosed with substantial hedgerows and tree lines along the boundaries. And there are 2 farm entrances, one on the junction with Droxford Road, which is here, and a newer one which is recently added under permitted development rights along Church Lane, which is here. There is one residential property, Church Cottage, immediately to the northwest of the boundary, and there are other residential properties along Droxford Road. So the proposal is for a purpose-built barn to allow for storage of farm machinery for the upkeep and maintenance of the orchard and the hayfield, storage of fruit crops, welfare and office area. So the barn is to be located 17 metres back from Church Lane, using the new access, and it will be built of oak, timber cladding and dark metal profiled roof. Just go to the elevations. And there's a large door to the front elevation to allow access for farm machinery. The design has a main core with a side extension step down on each side, which acts to reduce the overall bulk of the building while still allowing it to be functional with a higher roof line, which is 6.5 metres in the centre. There will be a permeable area of parking and turning in front of the building. Just go back to that one. Further significant planting is proposed in the form of new native hedgerow to replace the hedging that was lost due to the access and remove the non-native laurel that was unfortunately planted within this area here. Further fruit trees are to be planted as well, and this is being managed under Biodiversity Net Gains Section 106 agreement, which will deal with the management and maintenance of the planting and biodiversity enhancement. The existing orchard has been neglected for many years and requires a significant amount of TLC and upkeep to bring it back to the valuable agricultural asset, back to its prime. The orchard is a key local resource and its future viability depends on the appropriate infrastructure to support continued cultivation and maintenance. The site has well-established tree lines and hedgerows along the boundaries, and the barn will not be seen from wider public views. Just show you on photographs. Even when walking along the footpath through the orchard, due to the nature of the site, will not impact on users of the footpath. There are not uninterrupted views of the land, and the building is best placed in terms of wider visibility, retention of boundary treatment, access and enhancement. So this is from access. This is from Church Lane. You could just see the access there, and that's where the position of the barn will be going. So it'll be 70 metres back. There's the neighbouring property there. So this planting, this is back to looking towards Droxford Road boundary. This planting will go, so it's non-native. Sorry, just a few. So this is from the footpath through the orchard, so it's just some few. And it's boundary path along Droxford Road. And that's from Church Cottage. So this is a view from Vicarage Lane across the fields. So you can see the boundary line of trees. And this is the footpath which leads across, so it's a wider view. And the building will be over here. You can just see Church Cottage here. This is the other access, which so you've got Droxford Road here, Church Lane here, and this is the access here, which is a bit hairy, should we say, to get vehicles in. Sorry, just go back up to the thing. So the area of the barn, as you can see from those photographs, is the least harmful in terms of loss of orchard trees, and therefore a planning balance needs to be made regarding the best placement of the limited area of land with the least number of orchard trees lost. Some of those trees and the requirement to support the long-term production and safeguarding and enhancement of the protected orchard. This is a very concentrated agriculture undertaking, and the size of the building is seen to be commensurate with the needs of the holding and the size of the equipment required to maintain and support the rural enterprise. This will enable the orchard to be enhanced further, which will lead to the orchard's ongoing protection of the special qualities of the national park. So in summary, this is a relatively small development on the scale of the national park. Significant biodiversity and landscape enhancements will be made and will enable more productive conservation of the orchard in compliance with policy SD 39 of the South Downs Local Plan. Therefore, the recommendation is to approve as set out in the report, subject to conditions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. So we now turn to public speaking. And our first speaker is Neil Armitage. I don't think the Campbells are with you, are they?
No,
On their behalf. Wonderful. And you have up to 3 minutes. The timer will start when you start speaking and the microphone is pressed on. Exactly. Thank you very much.
Design and policies SD 4, 5 and 39. The design of the barn should be of the highest possible quality, which reflects and respects the exceptional quality of the natural, agricultural and built environment of the national park. It should adopt a landscape-led design approach and seek to enhance local character and distinctiveness of the area. The proposed barn is generic, bulky and bland. The planning officer's statement has not analysed the specifics of the design or the requirement for its relative height of 2.5 stories. Can the applicant be asked to revisit the design? Can the design review panel advise on a strategy to make the scheme relevant to the park and its specific location? Substantial damage has already been caused to the site, including 1, significant harm to the existing hedgerows, 2, the construction of a large permanent building with concrete foundations within 2 meters of the trunks of the existing mature trees on the boundary. 3, an unsympathetic site entrance lined with non-native species. 4, the installation of a new drainage system running beside the length of the hedgerow on Dropsford Road. And 5, a substantial part of the orchard site has been fenced off and divided into paddocks with access from an adjoining property. If the perhaps the committee would like to do a site visit. If the application progresses, may we ask that conditions are drafted to address the following issues. The barn use. The applicant's agent has referred to concerns that the client will use the large barn to house equipment for his local groundworks company. Can the prevention of this be conditioned, please? Conservation of the orchard. That the implementation of the restoration of the orchard and its ongoing maintenance is conditioned, as it is the fundamental justification for the necessity of the barn. Remediation of the site, removal of the new structures, a more sensitive rural treatment to the newly installed suburban access, and the repair and conservation of the damaged hedgerows.
Thank you very much. Members, do we have any questions of clarification? Councillor Gordon-Smith.
Could you let me know, is the orchard actually used as an orchard at the moment to produce apples?
As far as I know, it hasn't been for a number of years.
Thank you very much. You may return to your seat now. That's great. Thank you. Now we have, we would normally have had the parish council representative, Councillor Woodman, to speak, but unfortunately he's been taken ill. So I have agreed to read out his contribution. So if you could give me a 3-minute timer, Claire, and I'll read out what Swanmore Parish Council representative wishes to say. Members, if you could listen. Committee. As you know, Swanmore Parish Council objects to this development. Whilst the principle of development and the need for some of these facilities is recognised, there are a number of reasons why we feel it should be rejected in its current form. The size and scale of the proposed barn would seem to be excessive given the size of the orchard area being worked. We have seen nothing outlining the business operations which would help justify the overbearing nature of the proposal. Not only is there a huge surface area, but the building has an excessive height of 6.5 metres to the ridgeline. There are better designs and layouts that would reduce this height and the building's visibility from the surrounding area. The current surrounding hedgerows and vegetations would not screen this from view from the surrounding roads and footpaths, despite what the documentation may say. Schedule 2 Part 2 Class B of the Town and Country Planning Order of 2015 permits access where that access is required in connection with development permitted by any class in this schedule other than by Class A of this part. The proposed barn is not permitted development, hence why there is this planning application. The proposed access should have formed part of the planning application. We would challenge the officer response to this detailed in your pack, suggesting that the new entrance was required in relation to the maintenance of the existing orchard and therefore was permitted development, and that enforcement was not required. If this was the case, and given that the orchard had been there for a number of years, why was the original entrance sufficient for the maintenance and now it suddenly is not? Under the aforementioned policy and the special regulations for national parks, the permitted development rules do not apply, and this entrance should be part of this planning application and therefore subject to an enforcement action due to the removal of a protected hedgerow. Couple this with the polytunnel and the borehole that have been created on the land for which there is no planning permission or application. It demonstrates a disregard for the basics of the planning process, which is concerning given the status of the orchard as a habitat of principal importance under the Natural Environment and Rural Communities Act 2006, with the ensuing duties and obligations that this brings to the landowner. In summary, the Council is concerned about the proposed destruction of part of the orchard by an overbearing building. We note that the orchard is a natural England traditional orchard and as such is designated priority habitat and a wildlife haven. Whilst we support any efforts to restore the orchard, we don't think that a barn of this size and scale is necessary to achieve this aim and is in contravention of policies SD4 and SD34. And that was the contribution from Councillor John Woodman from Swanmore Parish Council. Again, since it's not him, we can't take any questions of clarification. So we move on to the supporter, Natalie Fellows. So Natalie, if you'd like to come forward. Thank you. You have up to 3 minutes and the timer will start when you press the button. When you start speaking, and the microphone is switched on by pressing the button on the base of the unit. So take your time, there's no rush, and when you're ready, you have up to 3 minutes. Thank you. Sorry, that's not managed to switch on. If you could just make sure the red light, that's it, perfect. Now you've switched it off again. Just press it on and leave it alone. That's it. Thanks.
The officer's report concludes that the proposal meets the requirements of the South Downs local plan, particularly policy SD39, which supports agricultural buildings where there is an identified operational need and where the scale is commensurate with the need. This orchard is a priority habitat and an important rural asset for Swanmore. The barn is essential to secure its long-term restoration, management and its future productivity. The applicants also intend to reintroduce additional rare apple varieties and to establish beehives on the site to support cross-pollination and orchard health. Traditional orchards across the area have been lost in recent years. This proposal directly addresses that trend by providing the infrastructure needed to safeguard and revive this orchard. Turning to scale. The report is clear that the building is modest in size, which is significantly below the 1,500 square metres which would otherwise could come forward if the farm was marginally larger under permitted development. The size was driven by operational need, the machinery required to maintain the orchard, any welfare needs and the safe covered storage of harvested apples, and equipment to help fight against pests and diseases. On visual impact, views are limited and well screened by existing orchard trees and boundary vegetation. The barn sits logically within a cluster of built form on Church Lane, adjacent to Church Cottage, and its position was discussed with the neighbour before the application was submitted. The proposed timber cladding and muted roof materials are typical of rural agricultural structures within the National Park. With respect to biodiversity and the orchard special status, the scheme delivers a significant biodiversity net gain, with over 12% habitat gain and almost 12% linear gain, fully secured through the recommended Section 106 legal agreement. Hedgerow enhancements, bat and bird features and the ecological management plan all add to the long-term environmental value of the site. Officers confirm that these measures more than compensate for the very limited tree loss where the barn is proposed. Highway matters have been fully addressed. Hampshire Highways raised no objection, vehicle movements are extremely low, and the Church Lane access is confirmed as lawful permitted development. Swept paths, visibility displays and traffic generation have all been assessed and accepted by the highway officers. This access was needed due to the abrupt relationship of the original access on the junction of Droxford Road, as you were seeing from the officers' photos. This provides access to an internal track system. Finally, the barn will enable the orchard's long-term conservation, which directly supports the national park purposes, and the external lighting is controlled by a suitable planning condition. Members are therefore asked to endorse the officer's recommendation and grant permission subject to the Section 106 agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for sticking to the timer things. Come again, Claire. Can you just press the button for me? Sorry. Thank you. Members, do we have questions of clarification? Councillor White.
So can you clarify whether the orchard is being used at the moment for apple production and what this barn will enable the business to do that they can't currently do with the facilities they already have? Thank you.
Yeah, so as you'd see, the orchard from the photos, it's quite a substantial size. In terms of the orchard, it's 4 hectares of the 4.7 hectares. There's about 49 rows of apple trees within the orchard. The apples that they grown there include Ashmead's Kernel, Discovery, Bramley and Cox, and the applicant's intention is to bring in additional sort of local rare varieties. In terms of why the barn's needed, at the moment there is no structures of any size that can accommodate any facilities associated with the management of the orchard. So in terms of the barn, it will include storage for apples, it includes a workshop, welfare facilities, space for a tractor, plough, a cultivator, tiller, which is essential to help prepare soil for planting of trees. You know, there's other equipment that you need, such as ladders, fruit crates, ride-on mower, spades, rakes, secateurs, that sort of thing, shears. And also the equipment is really important to help fight against pests and diseases, to ensure the careful management of the orchard, and help to fight against frost, which often has an impact on orchards. The applicant purchased the orchard a couple of years ago, and in that time they've had some instances because of the public right of way that often people leave let dogs go wild within the orchard, and there's been some incidents of sort of dog fowl within the orchard and that sort of thing. So there has been some fencing to try and help prevent that and make it more secure. But in terms of actually, in terms of sort of a business operation that hasn't started, we do need the equipment, and the applicant started to purchase quite a lot of equipment to do that, which is in the rounds of about £200,000 in terms of it's a sizable amount of equipment you need to actually manage and maintain the orchard. At the moment, they are picking apples, and so is the community by the looks of things quite regularly, but it's not commercially sold at the moment.
Thank you. That was very thorough. Councillor Laney.
Yeah, looking at the floor plan, the apple storage area is quite small compared to the rest of the building. And I would have thought that you'd want some form of chiller to enable you to store the apples for a longer period of time.
So there isn't a chiller at the moment. We haven't gone into that level of detail. It's a flexible barn, so the central barn did need the height for the tractor and sort of, which obviously more bulky forms of equipment. You've got on the sides there secure apple storage, and then you've got the open aspect on the other side, which again is flexible in terms of its usage. Then we've got some welfare facilities as well.
Thank you. And the other point is that you've got a diesel Bowser inside. Now, I would have thought that would have been normally put outside fire risk point of view.
What the applicant is particularly concerned about is security. And so some of the more valuable items and bits of equipment and plant are actually kept inside. You've got the roller shutter door for security, and some other aspects be kept more open. And the design was specifically kept the height in the main barn highest, and then it filters down on either side to try and reduce the bulk of massing. So that's the idea.
Thank you. Can I ask, one of the objectors mentioned that there's already some hard standing and a building already on the site, and various things have already been done. Is all that going to be consolidated in the new barn?
So essentially, that's what the barn is for. There is, I understand, some concerns about hedgerow management. I'm not aware of any hard standing that's being put in, only associated with the access. There is a borehole that's been recently established to provide water and irrigation for the orchard, and that's the timber structure that you saw from one of the photos. But as far as I'm aware, there's no other issues regarding anything else within site.
Okay, thank you. And I think the laurel hedge is coming out and something rather more appropriate going
Something
in.
native, yes.
And that's all being conditioned, isn't it? Is that right, Lisa?
Yes.
Okay. Raft of stuff. Yeah, I've been looking at the conditions. Very good. Okay, thank you very much indeed. I think, no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Councillor Pett.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, could you is this a question of clarification?
Yes.
Sorry.
Sorry, I think we heard the ridge height of the barn is going to be 6.5 metres, and the rule is that's it's got to be built to minimum scale to meet the need. Can you just confirm for me that there is a need to go that high?
It's quite typical for a barn to be of that height, and we've kept it so it's actually the ridge height is 6.5, but it filters down. You've got the lean-to elements on the side. Otherwise, if it continued down in a uniform shape, it would actually be a lot bulkier than what has been proposed.
Good, thank you very much. Thank you for your staying on for that last question. Okay, members, we now did you want to add anything, Lisa, following the contributions from the public?
I don't think so, Chairman. I think we've covered it. The design's typical agricultural building, the height of it. I mean, the height, it's excessive height, but I mean, it's not dissimilar to a double height but double garage. It's probably about a metre taller than that, and I think the perception of it is probably worse than the reality, probably what the reality will be. But obviously, everybody's got.
And it's stepped back from the road quite a long way, isn't it?
Yes. So I had a good walk around there. I went with my mum and dad, so it's very beautiful. The orchard, and it does need a lot of work doing. So it's overgrown. There's moss on all the branches and things, but it is still it's beautiful there. But it's weighing that balance up.
Okay, thank you. Members, questions on the report, please. Councillor White.
So the concerns were raised by the objector about the design of the barn, and also the landscape officer from the council has also raised some concerns that the design isn't landscape led. And I know we have a condition to approve the materials and all of that, external materials, finishes and things. I just wonder whether some of those comments from the landscape officer can be taken into account when you're approving the design, if you see what I mean, in terms of South Downs National Park is about enhancing the beauty of the landscape, and whether the barn design could fit into that a bit better, if you see what I mean.
Again, I think it's quite subjective. I think it's a typical agricultural designed building. The samples of materials have been requested so that we ensure that they are appropriate. It's supposed to be oak timber clad, and I'm not quite sure what else, apart from a brick built,
it's not concrete. I think
it's not concrete. It's a utilitarian building, and I'm it's, you know, it's quite a subjective subject as a design, and I'm not quite sure what else that you would expect. And as I say, there
Councillor White, sorry.
But
I suppose what I mean is the landscape officer had some serious concerns and whether they could be consulted in the design stage to alleviate some of those concerns.
Chair, obviously we're looking at what's in front of us in terms of the design. So it's either there's a significant concern with the design of the barn as we're seeing it, or we accept it as it is. And obviously I repeat Lisa's comments that it's a utilitarian building, but it's relatively modest scale, I would say, compared to a lot of farm buildings, and not, you know, there's a lot more utilitarian style buildings out there you'll see in the countryside.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. There are some objections and concerns about future use of the building. I know we've got in condition 4 in regards to the 10 years and only to be used for agriculture. Would any other sort of permitted development rights being withdrawn, do you think, be appropriate? I can't remember whether Class Q applies in the national park, but would Class R?
not for residential.
Okay.
No.
But any commercial use under Class R?
Well, it wouldn't, because it's got the condition.
Okay.
So I think
condition
that's right,
covers
isn't it, Dan? Yeah, you've got a condition on there. I don't think that would apply because, you know, sort of, and there's all sorts of caveats on that as well.
Brilliant, thank you.
I wondered, I see that the condition 4 is slightly amended in the update sheet. I was concerned because of the facilities that are included in the barn, which are fine, but whether there needs to be an extra condition that at no time should the barn be used for overnight accommodation. But I think, is that covered now by only use for agriculture?
Yeah, that would require permission in its own right anyway. So if it was, if you want to stay in the barn overnight, then it was, you know, it would, you know, cause some action.
Okay, if there are no more questions, members, we move to debate. Councillor Langford-Smith.
Thank you, Chair. As was pointed out in the report, if this area of land were just 0.3 of a hectare more, they would be able to put up an agricultural building under permitted development. And as such, that could be up at a height of 12 metres under permitted development. I think beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and I've seen an awful lot worse agricultural buildings. So I will be supporting the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I know the area very well and had a walk around at the weekend. The location of the barn is well screened, certainly from the northern side. It is on an elevation. However, that screening covers it. I think it's far enough away from residential properties. As Councillor Langford-Smith said, you know, this is an agricultural bit of land. The orchard is very overgrown. There are lots of brambles on many of the trees themselves, and it would be good to see it back in proper agricultural use rather than sort of overgrown as it currently is. It is an agricultural site, and we have suitably conditioned this so that it can't be used for overnight accommodation or commercial use. So lots of lorries and things coming and going shan't be allowed. So I'll be supporting this recommendation.
Councillor White.
Yeah, so this is an area that I drive past every single day, and so I've seen it derelict for quite a few years, and I really appreciate the fact that it's going to be re-established and used as an orchard. I also appreciate the replacement of the hedging and the non-native cherry laurel that's going to be replaced. I think it's really good, and there is sufficient screening, and that's going to be improved with the hedging. I just hope that the landscape officers concerns can be listened to regarding the design so that it enhances the beauty of the area.
Thank you, and I too would like to echo our delight that this historic orchard with its vintage and important selection of native and unusual apples is going to be cared for and maintained and used and commercially viable, hopefully soon. I think it's quite a nice design of a barn, actually. It's quite a nice. So I will also be supporting the officer's recommendation. So I think if there's no more debate, we move to the decision. So this application is recommended for approval. Can I see all those in favour, please? So that's all members, so that's unanimous. So that application is approved. Thank you very much. And that is the end of today's planning committee. Thank you.